So I got to the point I said, well, actually, I could probably make that money part-time. And what I've always wanted to do was make sure that I've got a career so that when I officially retire from football, my salary is decent enough that I can survive. So I've kind of built up if I started off on, say, 20 grand, but I had part-time income as well on top of that, I could have potentially, had promotions and got better at my job and then potentially been earning 35 grand at the end of my career, and I don't need to worry about football side of things. I can just retire and I've got a decent enough salary, because the amount of players I see now that, retire at 35 on maybe, anywhere between 30 to 50 grand a year, suddenly off the football, in the football scrap heap, trying to get a job on anywhere between 15 to 25 grand. And they're living a lifestyle that's they've been living for the last kind of few years because of the football side of things, and they've not got that. So I didn't want to be that. So that's why I said, right, I'm just going to step away from football, focus on me.
I don't even remember having massive conversations with my parents about stuff. It was just they were happy to support those decisions. So the college I chose was actually, none of my friends were going there. They went to the local college. And this was sort of like halfway on the way to training, but I knew someone that was going up. She trained at the same place. So I knew we could like lift share. So it was kind of like, it was part of the reason why I chose that college. And so everything was kind of factored around training and getting there. And felt like at the time I just was loving the progress, and I was progressing like all the time. It didn't feel like there was an end to that. And I just loved it. And I really wanted to see like where that could take me. When I first started trampolining, I didn't start out with the goal of going to the Olympic Games, even when I moved clubs to start competing, because like trampoline only became an Olympic sport in 2000. So wow. that was really new. So when I started trampolining, it wasn't even in the Olympics. So that was really a dream that sort of developed over time for me.
From Coordinate Sports, it's The Drive Phase, a show about sports founders, leaders and experts, and the stories behind their business journeys. In this episode, we'll be exploring the transition from being an elite athlete. I'll be joined by Laura Gallagher, Team GB Olympic trampoline gymnast, who gives insight into the life of an athlete and the importance of planning for the future. In addition, I'm joined by Conrad Balatoni, a former professional footballer who has successfully transitioned into the finance industry. Join us as we uncover the journeys of these remarkable individuals and discover the unique challenges and successes they encountered along the way. Enjoy the show. Okay, really excited and delighted to welcome Laura Gallagher to the show today. She's Team GB trampoline gymnast. Yeah, welcome to the show, Laura.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
No, really glad to get you on. We survived the kind of technical difficulties to get here. Really how we normally start the show with all of our guests. It's a slightly different one because we've got kind of privilege to have you with us, an athlete who's kind of still competing at their prime. So it's great insight for today. But normally what we try and do is go back to the start and give our listeners a little bit more insight. They might know you from your obviously competitive exploits with the Olympics and everything, but where would you say it all started for you with gymnastics and trampoline?
Yeah, I think I've sort of fairly typical starting into the sport. I was just at my local sports centre. I was doing a little bit of gymnastics, not for very long. They had trampolining on in the same gym at the same time, and it just looked really fun. So I think I was about 5 when I started, 5 or 6. When I started lessons there, just loved it from that moment. But I was doing so many other things at the time. I was lucky my parents were like sort of drive me around everywhere, and my brother.
That's what I was going to say. Was it just kind of as a kid, like most kids, trying to get you into everything, use some of that energy up, and gymnastics just happened to be one of those things?
Yeah, I was just super lucky with that, really. Like so my Saturday I'd do like dancing, and then I went to trampolining. Like Friday I'd do swimming. My mum started helping out on the pool as well, so we kind of got some free swimming lessons at the same time. And I was doing rugby, football, like just loads of different sports, which I just loved them all. But yeah, I think trampolining was always one of my favourites at the time.
Was that, I mentioned your mum there, in terms of your family, particularly sporty, and was it a case of them not necessarily pushing you, but thinking it'd be a good thing for you to get involved in as many sports as possible? Or was it you kind of crying out, I want to do this, I want to do that?
Yeah, definitely come from a sporty family. My brother loves sport. My mum and my dad were both rugby, and mum was lacrosse as well. So I guess naturally kind of in quite an active family outside of things. But yeah, I don't remember I remember leading, like, I don't know if my friends were trying a new sport or something, I would ask if I could go, and my parents would try and accommodate that. So yeah, I never felt like, I was never sort of guided into one particular sport. My mum did do some trampoline coaching. She was a PE teacher as well. Yeah, so I was never really guided into like one particular sport. We just were able to try everything really. And then sort of I did some competitions just at school level really, alongside everything else I was doing. And weirdly, the coach I'm with now, I have been for like 20 years, she picked me up when I was at that first school competition that I did when I was like 6 and asked me to, or 7, and asked me to join the club. And Mum was like, no, I think we're just a bit busy because at the time it was like 45 minutes drive away, and it was a big commitment, whereas this was just down the local sports centre. And so we said no, and it was until I think it was about 5 years later, the club I was at, they didn't do bigger competitions or anything like that. And I think I had said something about wanting to do some like competitions. I think it was about 12 or 11 or 12 at this point. And so I just got to move clubs to join this club with the coach that had said that a few years earlier. Yeah, and just started competing. It kind of went on from there. And
so obviously talent ID there, then spotting you all the way back at
it's just quite funny. Yeah, and funny that my mum said no at the time. Like I'm kind of glad that she did, because I don't know, I wouldn't have had the same journey that I've had. And I don't know, it might have been different. I was allowed to try everything, and it was kind of led by me, that decision to compete. And I was lucky enough that to have that support network to be able to do that as well. Like I said, it was about a 40-minute drive. So
what was it like? Because obviously you grew up in Somerset, right? So in terms of the gymnastics, obviously heavily focused on equipment and requirement for certain equipment and the setup. So was that a case that, just to get to good facilities would be a 45-minute drive for you, probably the same for most people at that time?
Yeah, I guess so. The local club I started at had really good facilities, but the coaches, it like this a big commitment to compete at weekends and things, and they didn't want to do that. So that was really why I moved. So we were lucky that we had that access to that really locally. It was like in walking distance from where I live. But then obviously moving to this club where it was a bigger club with more members and just access to like a higher standard as well. It just enabled me to like progress, I suppose, and more opportunities in that sport. But continued with most of my other sports at this time. It wasn't until I was like 15, I think I stopped doing some of the other stuff.
That's pretty rare, right? So in terms of, you mentioned there, like obviously noticed, scouted effectively 5, 6 years old. So for gymnastics, it is one of those on the kind of, along with swimming, where you need to kind of focus really early and kind of specialise. Yeah. But for you, you've got, that's a debate, I guess, in terms of generalising and going through all the different sports versus focusing on one from really early at 5, 6 years old. So it feels like it was a positive experience for you not doing that. Yeah, no, definitely.
For me personally, I think I'm really glad that I did all of those things alongside this sport. I mean, I don't know if I'd still be doing it now as an adult if I hadn't have done that. But I think trampolining, it is a bit of a later start than gymnastics. Is slightly earlier. So I think the sort of peak age is a bit older in trampolining than it is in gymnastics. So, but I guess even back then I was a bit later on than most people in my sport. So I think my first international I was 15. That was in Belgium. And then I think it was after that competition, it was a world age group. After that competition, I think I decided that that's the sport I wanted to see what I could do.
So got the international and then started taking it seriously after that.
Yeah, I've always been really competitive and always just like worked as hard as I possibly can whatever I'm doing. But I think that was like, okay, maybe I need to look at like commitments and stuff, what I'm doing around the sport. And my coach had been saying for ages, but you need to maybe do a bit less, because I was doing, like, for example, on a Wednesday I'd get a lift up with, I don't know, a teacher or someone, whoever was going that way, because Mum often had matches after school and Dad worked away quite a lot. So I'd get a lift up with whoever. If I was lucky, it would be Mum, go training and then come back. She'd have cooked me tea that I'd eat in the car, and then we'd go to netball and then on to table tennis. I was just like super lucky. It was not, like, when I think back, I'm like, oh my God, my parents, like, they did so much just about that opportunity. I suppose I had those opportunities. I was lucky.
Definitely. Yeah. So what did it look like in terms of, like 50, you said 15, got that first international representing the country, and then how did things change? Or I guess what was talking about all the different clubs you go to, but what was the focus in terms of training then specifically? If you said, right, I'm going to commit to trampolining and be the best I can be, etc. How does that program look? Is it suddenly become really intense, or is it kind of, how do you think about swimming? Is it every day, or how does it go?
No, so I was training on the trampoline. I think I went up to doing 4 times a week at that point, but I think I was only doing 3 before then. It's quite a long time ago, so I just remember. But I think I went up to 4 times a week. Saturdays I'd do 4 hours on a Saturday, and so it it never felt intense or anything, so I just enjoyed it. It was just really fun for me. And at that point, I wasn't, of all the sports I was doing, I was probably at that point the worst at trampoline than the other sports. So, but it was the one I enjoyed the most out of all of them. So I really wanted to just see what I could do. So after that, obviously I left school and chose the subjects I chose around at college were chosen around training times. Thoroughly have done them. Chose not to go to university at that point because it would have meant moving clubs, and at that point it just wasn't something I wanted to do. So I went into full-time work after college. So all those decisions that I made were based around like getting to training, until I could drive, obviously, get into training and how I could get the best out of myself when I got to training. And again, that all came from me. I don't even remember having massive conversations with my parents about that stuff. It was just, they were happy to support those decisions. So the college I chose was actually, none of my friends were going there. They went to the local college. And this was sort of like halfway on the way to training, but I knew someone that was going up. She trained at the same place, so I knew we could like live share. So it was kind of like, it was part of the reason why I chose that college. And so everything was kind of factored around training and getting there and like being able to, so it's kind of,
So you mentioned now in terms of like you enjoy, it's almost like, and it's hard for me to think every time you see trampoline, anyone gets on trampoline, it's hard not to be smiling when you're just doing it recreationally. Yeah. So I'm assuming and you're enjoying it. But was there, because of the decisions you're making around college, and these are the kind of it's a time in your life when you're making big decisions and you're making those around the sport, did you have something that underlying, all right, I'm going to see this all the way through, I want to go see them, I want to do this? Because as you talk about it now, it's kind of quite natural, but it must have been something that was pulling you towards the end goal.
I don't know. It felt like at the time I just was loving the progress, and I was progressing like all the time. It didn't feel like there was an end to that, and I just loved it, and I really wanted to see like where that could take me. When I first started trampolining, I didn't start out with the goal of going to the Olympic Games, even when I moved clubs to start competing, because like trampoline only became an Olympic sport in 2000. So that was really new. So when I started trampolining, it wasn't even in the Olympics. So that was really a dream that sort of developed over time for me. So, but I guess just that hunger to sort of see how far I could get and where I could, how far I could push myself. And I can't really explain. It was just like it's just a feeling that I really wanted to see what I could do. But I carried on so I did netball at college around, just because that was a fun social thing to do with my friends, and did the college competitions as well for them. So I was able to have that kind of balance, that social life, training, study kind of balance. I did get put on special measures though for my psychology, which was interesting because I had in the first year, back then the A levels were split into 2 years, and you could take your AS level and then your A level in the second year. And I couldn't do my AS level because of the European Youth Championships at that time. And I chose to go to Europeans because who knows, I don't know when I'd get that.
Get that chance again, yeah, exactly.
My psychology teacher, she really didn't get it at all. And she was like, I really advise that you don't take this into the second year. I think you'd fail. And she actually said that. Wow. So part of the condition of me being able to do my second year, and because I had to take all my exams in one go, was that I had to get these extra sessions, extra lessons. And also like, because some of the weeks we had like an assignment every week, and some weeks I just didn't have time to like spend on the work. So the weeks I did, I'd get a decent grade, and the weeks I didn't, I obviously, you can't blag it. So yeah, that didn't look good, I guess, on paper, but I knew that I knew my reasoning for it, and I tried explaining, I had this and this week, and unfortunately it didn't.
It didn't help with the teachers.
Yeah, just with that particular teacher, didn't really didn't quite get it, but I got an A anyway. But you know what? Who knows? If she hadn't have said that to me, maybe I wouldn't have got an A. But
yeah, maybe I'd give you that motivation, to
exactly.
prove it wrong.
But yeah, so like just lots of decisions, I guess, the big decisions. And I always put trampolining first, and just I think led by the passion, I suppose, for it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of listeners are business owners and kind of interested in the kind of economics of things behind the scenes and how it all works. I mean, in terms of that life of a trampoline gymnast, in terms of how's it funded, how does it work? I mean, you said you're in college, you finished college. Is it almost like a lottery funding, or were you successful in terms of sponsorship? How did it stack up? And I was assuming it's like most Olympic sports, it's not flooded with money, and so how does it tend to work for an athlete? What's the
There's been massive change in our sport. So from when at that point for me, there wasn't much funding at all. There were a couple of like grants, like £500 grants and stuff from local sources. But like the World Junior Championships are self-funded disciplines. They still are now. And I think so the one where I became a junior world champion was in Canada, and that cost like £2,000. So had to raise money. I'm from a really sort of normal family. My mum's a PE teacher, my dad's he's a planning engineer. And yeah, they worked really hard to be able to like pay for my fees and everything like that. And as soon as I could, I took responsibility for that. So at college, I was working in a shoe shop. I was working in Echo shoes alongside my studies. And yeah, I've always worked alongside training and studying and competing and everything. So kind of I've got that from my parents, I suppose. But yeah, like when we started, there was no psychological support, no nutrition, no S&C, strength and conditioning, no none of that. That kind of got introduced. I think it was around 2010, 2011, and that gradually got introduced as well. When I first started, we saw own things. There's some really lovely, there's some lovely people out there that are willing to help. So I was lucky to access like strength and conditioning help from a local gym, a guy there, and a girl called Helen as well. They helped me out with that and looking after me with massage and any sort of sports therapy that I needed at that time.
So it's almost like sponsorship, in-kind sponsorship type.
And they gave up their own time. They came and watched training a couple of times as well. And like I said, it was a bit of a drive out, so they went out of their way to do that for nothing. There's loads of good people out there that are really, really lucky to have been able to help me on my way. But yeah, then it sort of gradually changed. The EIS came involved in our sport. We had access to all of that, which was like a complete game changer as well. And we learned so much so quickly. The sport kind of grew, and it has done ever since then. And yes, it's become, I'd say it was very like on an amateur level back then, but now it's like we've got a permanent facility that we can access, whereas back then when we had squad meetups, we would get out the trampoline ourselves and put the equipment away and have to do everything like that.
Where's that based now then? So that's a kind of a central, like a national centre then?
Yeah, so we're based at illustrious, which is where gymnastics is based. The national centre is based as well. And yeah, like I say, we have access to psychology support, strength and conditioning, nutrition, physio, medical, which is so important. And we're so lucky to be able to access that, because in the work that I do now, like I meet so many athletes that don't have access to that. I've never taken that for granted, I think, because we didn't have it when we started out. It was all like, find it yourself. If you get injured, look up, you got to sort that out yourself as well. Whereas now we have so much support around us. There's so many programs and so much research that they're doing to move the sport even further along, just keep it progressing forwards. And I know that's the same across a lot of the Olympic disciplines as well. So it's been for me really like amazing to be part of something that, and to be able to have seen those changes. Like I look at the juniors now and they walk into a setup that's already there and it's been there, and it's like they don't know what it's like to...
Do you feel, do you start telling them, you don't know what it's like back in my day? Or did you...
Okay, yeah, back in my day. Yeah, it's a bit like that. But it's the same, my club. So we're not based 45 minutes away now. We've eventually managed to get a permanent facility for my home club as well. So we now have... Yes, we have 8 trampolines there and a community gym set up there as well. So, and that's actually just up the road for me. So all those years of like travelling and training between Cheddar, Bath, just travelling around and getting jobs near the training place at that time, don't have to do that anymore. Although in the lead up to the games, I was based up at Lilleshall because the setup's so good there, and we have access to, like, for me the biggest game was like performance analysis, and that was just the biggest win for me. And just having access to that is really, like, it's been really crucial for my performances and progression. So yeah, but it has changed so much, and the funding's changed, and so yeah, now with lottery funding, but I've been on and off of that over the years. Because it's quite, it's performance based. You're funded to get those results. So
touching on that, just because you're talking about support and all the kind of the wraparound support there. From the EIS, we had Kevin Curran on the show recently. He was explaining exactly the kind of setup and the work that they're doing is fantastic. I know for you particularly at this time, in terms of obviously where you are in your career and also personally, that support is kind of crucial. We were talking about it just before we started. I understand congratulations are in order, and I'm really interested in terms of what that support looks like, and also coming back to.
Yeah, so I'm expecting my first child in January, and it's just a really tricky, I think for female athletes, it's that when's a good time to put your family first. And for us, I'm 33 now, sort of put so much into my sport. I've been part of the national team for like 17 years. Like I said, a lot of the time I put all my decisions around how I can get the best from myself in sport. And it's not been an easy ride. Like between London and Rio, I had like 2 years off, completely injured, and subsequently spent a little bit of time away from the sport because that was just, unfortunately, quite just the challenge too far for me.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just because it came after a few injuries that I'd had before then as well. And it was just a bit too much. So I took some time away, and I'm so glad that I did go back to the sport because that took me to Tokyo and the results that came before Tokyo as well. I wouldn't change my journey, but it's not been easy. And yeah, it's just the pregnancy is just something that we're very excited about. But also I think it is really important to mention like how times have changed from no support or understanding or anything to now. I've had an incredible amount of support from my sport. But gymnastics have been like brilliant. I've had meetings throughout about how like return to training, that all of the things I can put in place to help support my pregnancy and my return to training as well, and how I can keeping involved with the squad at the moment and how I can give back as well. So
it's good to have that kind of support in there with anyone who's any expecting mother for the first time. It's obviously all the anxieties and the worries and things that come with that, plus for yourself on top of that, everything from training and competing and kind of getting back into the team or meeting. There's always, because there's certain deadlines, right? So the champs are going to be at that time, and this is what we're trying to aim for. So having that support must be invaluable.
Yeah, no, it's incredible. And when I just look back at what things and how far we've come and the support that is out there for female, like women athletes at the moment and going forwards, it's brilliant to see and be part of that. And unfortunately, after Tokyo, I had to have some shoulder surgery, but I'm being supported through that and the rehab process. And so it's just, I feel very lucky to have that now. Like I say, before we wouldn't have had that, and then maybe I wouldn't still be here again now if that wasn't in place. So it's been quite a journey, and I'm really looking forward to sort of being able to give back when I do return. So
yeah, definitely. Well, congratulations. Looking forward to January for sure. You mentioned giving back, and you did mention about some of the other work that you're doing outside of training and the sport. I understand you're involved with some organisations known to us, like with Dame Kelly Holmes Trust on the show and Switch to Play coming up. What type of work do you do with them at the moment? Is it kind of the athlete mentor stuff or other?
Yeah, so just at the start of lockdown, or basically a couple of years before Tokyo, I was working in an alternative education provision with young people that were outside of mainstream for various reasons, most in care or just various different situations. And that was quite challenging, and I really loved that. It was alongside my psychology degree as well, and that was really amazing experience and I loved it. But as we got closer, because I was training away in Shropshire, I couldn't do that job for any longer, so I left the job. But I was always kind of looking for something that I could do alongside training still that kind of fitted with my interests and what I'd been and building my experiences as well. And I saw the opportunity with the Kelly Holmes Trust, the Dame Kelly Holmes Trust, and becoming an athlete mentor. So I got in touch with them at the start of lockdown and joined that cohort that year. So they basically train you up, which was great because it could actually put in place the stuff, use the stuff I'd learned in my degree and things. And now, yes, so I go into schools at the moment. I've just been doing the On Track to Achieve program. So I've been going around to the different schools, working with young people on the wellbeing programs. So that's been quite enjoyable. Just starting another program next week, actually. And yeah, and with Switch to Play, that's something that I'm quite passionate about personally. For me, like I've sort of touched on a minute ago, between London and Rio led to me taking some time out of the sport. So I had that transition experience. Just, I guess, a bit of mental health, I suppose, was the reason why I transitioned out. Was really struggling at that time. Sort of had about 6-7 months out of the sport. Wasn't going to go back in. Took up hockey. Remembered why I liked sport so much. And my boss was sort of integral to all of that as well. But that first transition was just really brutal. But I've sort of managed to come back into the sport with the support of the coaching staff at British Gymnastics and my personal coach, who's always been there I've been my personal coach for 18 years now. Sort of come back into that and have been able to understand that journey a bit more and be able to prepare a bit more. So I don't think the next time I do, at some point my career will end and I'll be ready for that time this time. And I'm lucky that I had that, or I was able to go back in and sort of have that experience and then come back in a more positive place and achieve the things that I was really wanting to achieve. And not everything. I haven't achieved everything that I would want to achieve. And unfortunately, the games wasn't one of those for me. But yeah, so Switch to Play, we work with athletes, supporting them through their journey and beyond sport, and that's become quite a big passion of mine. And so I feel quite strongly that about the supporting athletes like through and beyond, and that they're more than athletes. And it's really cool as well that it's become a bigger talking point, I think, across sports now. Gymnastics have recently launched their program called Gymnastics and Beyond, which is brilliant. So there's been a lot of work going into this. It's like a program that supports the world-class program athletes through their transition and preparing them for things like providing or offering work experience opportunities that you can do within British gymnastics, and that's just brilliant. That's just things like that are just really great. Again, has shown how far we've come from.
Definitely. I was going to say, I guess your perspective changed. If you took that time out of the sport and then came back in, you've got a totally different perspective. You've kind of seen it end of, if you like, and then you kind of know what it's going to feel like, what's coming down the line. Yeah.
Well, I think also the job I had at that time, before I came back into the sport, in that time out, I think I started that work in the alternative education provision, and that was we were working some really challenging case profiles, I suppose, and that really opened my eyes. That gave me perspective. They helped me just as much as hopefully I helped them, and so that was like an amazing opportunity. But yeah, Switch to Play, I'm like just really like what they do and the services they provide, which are free to athletes to access, and that's so important. There are lots of places like that now out there, but I think it's just that raising awareness to athletes that there are places and people that they can go to for support, because some people have a really good experience of athlete transition. They're excited about the next step and kind of the natural end comes, but then there's so many that through deselection or injury or for just a bit of a surprise, that ends suddenly, and that's really hard to deal with. And even those that do have that natural end, some have spoken to athletes that years later they still come to us because they're still struggling to adjust to that lifestyle and feel that feeling that they got from sport that they're not getting from their work. And it's really interesting.
No, it does. I was going to ask in terms of, for you, obviously career, still a way to go and still another cycle, etc. for yourself. But when you look into the future, I'm assuming now with the work you're doing, you're already kind of planning and thinking about what it might look like, and do you know what that looks like for you, or what you're going to go into? Is it more looking down the psychology route with your degree and putting that into practice?
Yeah, a bit of everything really. Yeah, I'm still exploring what I want to do, but I feel more prepared for it and I have a clearer idea. So I definitely think teaching is something that I'd like for long term want to be interested in. But I think it's just looking at, I like so many things. I know it's really hard to but yeah, I think teaching's probably a long term, and that's kind of the experience that I've been gaining in all the different things that I'm doing has kind of added to that. But I think for something that's more sustainable, maybe primary teaching, because I love the work in the alternative centre, but it was I think I don't think I'm the sort of person that can take that on
for a long period of time. Yeah, I understand.
It's hard. It's amazing. It's an amazing job, but it's hard. It's hard to like just leave that at the door. And
no, definitely. And obviously being a mum first and foremost is going to be a big job. Final question for me. I really appreciate your time, Laura. We always ask this kind of reflective question. It might be one that you already tell your athletes when you're mentoring them, etc. But if you're going to go back and give yourself one piece of advice when you started out on your career, what would that be?
I think, I don't know how to word it, but just not to worry so much, like be more courageous and be more bold, be bolder. Because I think when I started with Switch to Play, we have to do this coat of arms like task, and it was like a quote that you live by. And I found that really hard because there's lots of quotes, but I think the quote I use is have the courage to try. And I think I spent so many years being too hard on myself that I didn't celebrate the successes or realise until they had gone, like what I'd actually done, what I'd actually achieved. I didn't take the time to like acknowledge the successes, which then when you have the bad moments, if you haven't acknowledged those successes, it kind of leaves you in a bit of a funny space.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think, just having the courage to try and not worry, just celebrate that moment. That's just important, and just make the most of everything because it goes so quickly. Make the most of every opportunity that you can get. That wasn't one thing, that was about 5 things.
No, it was a great answer. Laura, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no worries, thank you.
Okay, I'm delighted to welcome Conrad Balatoni to the show this week. He is an ex-professional footballer and now owner of Conrad Balatoni Wealth Management, aligned to St James's Place Wealth Management. So welcome to the show, Conrad.
Thanks for having me, James. Good to see you.
Great to get on. I know we've been trying to schedule it for a while, so it's great to have a good chat and get into all things football and wealth management. But before we do that, generally we start out by giving the listeners a bit of a background on you, let them get to know you a bit better. I'm sure we'll have some kind of Scottish Football League fans, but for those who didn't used to watch the Scottish Premier League, where did you grow up, mate? What was kind of your earliest moment or memory of kind of football? Was that at home, at school, just in the street?
Yeah, it was probably at home. I grew up in Leeds. Grew up in Leeds until I was about 8 years old, and my very first memory was birthdays, balloons in and around the house. I've got two sisters, so there was always balloons, kicking the balloon about, pretending I was a footballer. We had quite a big garden back down in Leeds, so I always was out there. But obviously, being the only boy, my mum and my dad split up, so I never really had anyone to play with. So it was always just kind of trying to find a neighbour to play with and kind of grow up and stuff like that. But just growing up in Leeds, I always wanted to be a goalie for some reason, and I don't know why.
What is it?
And then it was really odd. So actually, I've got quite a funny story. I was playing boys club at Leeds, playing for a team called Wetherby Athletic, I think it was. I got asked to go to Leeds trials when I was younger, and obviously at this point I was playing outfield, but deep down I always wanted to be a goalie. So I went to Leeds trials, and it was for outfield players, and I rocked up, full goalie kit on, goalie gloves and everything, wanting to play in goals, and they were like, this isn't a goalie tryout, this is like an outfield tryout. And I was just like, oh, well, I want to be a goalie. And it just kind of like, looking back now, I'm just, why did I ever think I wanted to be a goalie? I wasn't brave enough to do that.
Yeah, what was that? Did you have some, was there like, I don't know, an influence on you wanting to be a keeper? I'm trying to think of a famous goalkeeper.
Do you know, there wasn't an influence, no. I think it was just at that age, I just loved diving about and just maybe doing like camera saves. You know, because if you're playing football inside the house, very rarely can you kind of play properly football. But I always remember what I used to do was like chuck a balloon up, dive on the sofa and try and save it.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was like always doing these amazing saves on the sofa, which was like really soft landing and quite chilled, like quite happy and enjoyable. And then when you go out into kind of the hard ground and you're doing it and you're getting balls pelted at you, it's kind of why I was even thinking about doing that.
That's what I say. Keepers all nuts out there. That's what they say. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of my best mates is a keeper, but I always say to them that they're a strange breed. I love them to bits. I mean, because if it wasn't for them, I'd have probably scored or probably been at fault for a lot more goals in my career.
And then, so obviously, you said you moved up to Scotland. Was that kind of before school, or was there? Obviously, you started playing football at home or getting it, obviously showing an interest. Did you sign with Leeds, or what was the kind of transition at that point?
So no, nothing ever happened with Leeds, and then unfortunately, kind of my mum and my dad kind of weren't getting on, and a lot of kind of problems with child support and stuff like that. So my mum got offered a job up in Edinburgh, and she decided just to go for it because, you know, she thought new life,
fresh start type thing, yeah.
Yeah, benefit her, more money and stuff like that going up there. So she took it. We moved up there when I was 8. And obviously we didn't know anyone up there apart from her boss, which was like a really close family friend. So we knew like a family there, but that was it really. So going up there, didn't have any friends, didn't know what I was going to do. And I was in school, so I started a new school, you know, and it was quite tough going into a new school at kind of 8, 9 years old, going into people I'd been with each other.
Friendship groups, they've already created the friendship groups. And that
yeah, my mum wanted me to get me into a school called Gillespie's, James Gillespie's, but there was no room for us, so we got put into another school, which was a really nice school actually. But the other school that we wanted to go to was really close to the house, so it was a bit of a nightmare. But I think after the first year, we managed to get a place into the new school. So I'd went from moving up from a school to a new school, integrating with a new class, kind of making some pals, and then suddenly having to go to a whole new school again. So it was quite difficult to kind of settle and stuff like that. But I was fortunate that one of my neighbours played football, and I got on really pally with him. And that's kind of when my football career up in Scotland kind of took off, because he was part of a boys club team, and they asked me if I wanted to come along, and I kind of signed for them. And then that's when I got scouted for my professional career and stuff like that. So kind of everything kind of works out for a reason.
And were you always like get signed professional? So we always, when you're at the boys club and stuff, we always like that level above everyone you were playing with? Was it noticeable? Obviously, I'm guessing it was noticeable, and I was that. I guess you probably maybe help the transition, right? If you're like suddenly the best player, just join the school or just join the team.
I'm not being big-headed and stuff like that, but yeah, like I could tell a difference that I was head and shoulders above the majority of people that I would play with or against. So I was quite I knew I had ability. I just didn't know kind of how good I was maybe, but I'd never came across anyone that was better than me. And that's just, from what I remember anyway, there was no one better than me in kind of primary school or boys club. And there was good players, but maybe not. No, I don't think I played against anyone that's went and had a better career than me at boys club level. So it's quite funny because obviously I mentioned that I wanted to be a goalie. So the team that I went and signed for, I still had this drive and ambition to be a goalie at that point as well. I remember we used to play like a small five-a-side tournament in a place called the World of Football, and original goalie got injured, and the manager for me was like, Conrad, listen, we've got an injury. We've not got a goalie. Do you want to go in goals? I know you like going in goals. And I was like, yeah. I was absolutely buzzing. I think we got beat or something like that, and I wasn't great. And I was like, oh, I'd love to play in goals again. He was like, listen, if you get a twin brother that's just as good as you can stay in goals, and your twin brother can play outside because you're too good not to play out in the outfield. So I was just like, kind of from then on, I kind of just thought, you know what, I'll just play outfield. I'll score the goals, and I'll just be top dog basically in the team. And it kind of just spiraled from there. And yeah, so I think that was my last ever goalie appearance.
Nice. And then I guess family wise, was that something that was put, like, obviously you moved up with your mum and sister, what have you, moving into, I guess, being scouted, going pro, was that something that they would buy for you, or was just want the best for you, or was it make sure you get your academics done? And what was the kind of the environment, home environment around sport?
It was fine. I mean, my sisters never really cared. They went into football. My younger sister played for a little bit, but she was never any good. So, I mean, they never watched it with me. They never came to, I don't think they very rarely came to any of my games. I think they came to one game where we won the league, and that was it. But it was mainly my mum. My mum drove me everywhere. My mum did everything pretty much for me. You know, when I went kind of into Hearts as a youth player, she had to drop me off to training and pick me up from training, because obviously sometimes I'd have to get the bus. But there was a couple of dads who helped me massively with kind of joining a boys club, doing pickups, doing drop-offs of training for matches because their sons played as well. And they kind of knew that my mum had two kids that she couldn't kind of just leave in the house because they were still quite young and stuff like that. So if I was to play, which they obviously wanted me to because I was one of the better players, well, I was the best player, they'd go out of their way to come and pick me up and stuff like that. So I had a lot of help, and so did my mum. But my mum's always been there, like, kind of looking out for me, and she'd probably come to most of my games. She doesn't come very often because she doesn't like driving in the dark, but she's seen enough of them kind of growing up that I'm not that fussed if she comes or not.
Yeah, but that's that support system. I think we talk about it a lot, the amount of commitment from parents, you know, like taxiing around, even just at whatever level, let alone like academy or pro level. So how did things kind of escalate from, you got signed, was it like 15 you signed with Hearts, and then what was, I guess, career-wise, what did it look from there until, and obviously we're going to get on to what you're doing now, but yeah, that sporting career, really interested to hear that progression.
Yeah, so my career went, so I was playing boys club, I got asked to go and trial at Hearts, and I was a central midfielder at the point, so I was always kind of bossing the games. So I went to Hearts and trained a couple of times, and when I went there I realised that maybe I wasn't as good as what I thought I was, coming up against better players and playing with better players.
So that's the first time you kind of found your level, right?
Yeah. First time I kind of went and played at a level where boys were actually, you know, probably on the same, if not maybe a little bit better at me. So I was kind of like, wow, like this, maybe I'm not as good as what I thought I was, if these boys are the boys that I've been. But, you know, I had to remind myself that these boys have maybe been there since they were like kind of 10, 11 years old. So they'd grown up playing at a, you know, with a decent club with decent coaches for the last 3 or 4 years. Unfortunately for me, I got signed, but what they said to me was, look, you're probably not going to play central midfield, but you can play centre half if you want. So I dropped back into centre half, and I played really well. I was fortunate enough that kind of when I got to the age of 15, so the year before I was able to sign my pro contract, I think, and don't take this with 100% truth, but there was kind of word going around maybe that there was a couple of clubs maybe interested in 2 or 3 of our players, and I think maybe I was one of them because I'd been playing quite well. And obviously teams like Rangers and Celtic want to try and sign the best young talent for them coming into the youth team and stuff like that. So I was lucky enough that Hearts pulled me in one night when I was 15 and kind of said to me, look, just like, you know, we usually don't tell people that they're getting contracts until at the end of the season, but we want to offer you a pre-contract. So kind of at the age of 15, I was in my school. I think I was in 4th year, because the way it works, you can leave after 40, but I was in a year above myself, so I couldn't leave until a certain age. So when I signed that, obviously I signed that pre-contract straight away because it was Hearts were my club.
Well,
And
did they tell you like, oh, don't tell anyone, don't release it, or what was you like? I'm assuming you went straight out and told everyone that you just signed. Right?
There was me and there was two other players that had been offered a pre-contract, and they were the two players that I think, well, us three, I think, were potentially the ones that, from recollection, people were saying, "Oh, teams are interested in you."
So it's almost like they're trying to protect the asset, get you on side.
And I mean, I could be well off there, but it doesn't make sense why they would offer a pre-contract to three players and not the other players that they were offering a contract to, if that makes sense. There was obviously maybe a little bit of truth in it, but I don't know how much. So, I signed that straight away, basically. And, it was realised my dreams, playing for my boyhood club that I grew up supporting. And I left in fifth year and went pro. So, I chucked kind of my last year at school away because I knew basically I was going from school straight away into professional football. I thought I'd pretty much done what I wanted to do, and I never really thought about trying to get an education because I was going into that kind of role for 3 years.
I guess now, talking now in hindsight as well, and where you've moved on to do, what would your thoughts be now, like knowing what you know? Would you have stayed on, or would you, I don't know if you actually could or not, and I guess YTS and stuff at the time, or education at the time, you go straight into the first team of you at that point when you signed?
I still would have left when I left. I was 16 when I left, but I left in fifth year. So I would have got like my hires, which is what they call them up here. So you have your standard grades and then you have your hires and then your advanced hires or whatever it's called. The only thing I would have done differently is probably I would have tried to pass my exams in my last year. And I didn't pass them because I just kind of chucked it away because I thought, I'm going to be a footballer. And that was all I ever wanted to be. So I thought, and I knew for some reason, always deep down, I always had a feeling that I'm going to make it as a footballer. And it was really odd. And I know a lot of players will say that, but deep down, I just thought, I'm too good not to make it as a footballer one way or another, whether that's at Hearts or whether it's at somewhere else. So I kind of didn't work hard in school in my last year, which I kind of regret. But because of obviously when I left school, I was like, right, what's my next move? Like, do I need to go back to uni and stuff like that? And then obviously I've come into this profession. So everything kind of worked out for the best, to be honest. And I didn't have any problems leaving at that age. I know people stay longer at school for certain reasons, one or another, and they get the qualifications and then they go into football. It just depends on what kind of you're brought up with and kind of what your parents say and stuff like that. So for me, I was absolutely ecstatic.
Yeah, and it's worked out. I think that self-belief's what you need anyway. Like you said, you always knew it was going to happen. Almost brought it into, willed it into action. Obviously, you've got the skills and stuff, but you have to have that belief in yourself. I want to talk about your transition, but before that, just in terms of your career, like good long career, right, in professional. So you've gone, is it 10 years roughly? 8 or 10 years in Scotland?
Yeah, so I still play just now. I play part-time. But yeah, I started off at 16 and I stepped away from full-time football at the age of 27. So kind of 11 years full-time football. And then the rest of that, I've played part-time for the last kind of 5 years. What was behind that decision at that point, to step away? Like I said, your dream, always wanted to, most people probably want to, you're still playing now, but, they'd try and drag it out as long as possible to stay right at the top. And there. What was behind that decision to step away from full-time? So I was down at Torquay United for 4 months from January until April. And I didn't really enjoy it. I was away for the family. I just had a wee boy. My missus was up here. She's a teacher, so she wasn't moving down. And basically, I came back up and I was like, right, I don't know what I'm going to do. Trying to see what other clubs are interested in me because obviously I hadn't been in Scotland for the last 4 months. So I needed to make sure that teams were interested. And there was a couple of teams that kind of come to me and says, look, we like you and we'll sign you, but our budget's terrible. We can only offer you, 400 quid a week. And I was like, that's a potential 50% wage cut from what I'm taking. I was like 27 at the time, mortgage, kid, family to provide for. No one in their right mind would continue in the same profession if they turn around if a new job turns around and says, we're going to give you 50% of what you were on before, but come and join us, you'd be off your rocket. Do you know what I mean? So I got to the point I said, well, actually, I could probably make that money part-time. And what I've always wanted to do was make sure that I've got a career so that when I officially retire from football, my salary is decent enough that I can survive. So I've kind of built up if I started off on, say, 20 grand, but I had part-time income as well on top of that, I could have potentially, had promotions and got better at my job and then potentially been earning 35 grand at the end of my career. And I don't need to worry about football side of things. I can just retire and I've got a decent enough salary because the amount of players I see now that, retire at 35 on maybe, anywhere between 30 to 50 grand a year. suddenly off the football, in the football scrap heap, trying to get a job on anywhere between 15 to 25 grand, and they're living a lifestyle that's they've been living for the last kind of few years because of the football side of things, and they've not got that. So I didn't want to be that. So that's why I said, right, I'm just going to step away from football, focus on me. I didn't know what I was going to do at that time. I had a wee inkling. I thought if I can build something up from 27 until maybe 33, 34, I'll be in a much better position financially than what a lot of other players would be
And
in
then
that position.
then it's almost on your terms then, right? When you start, obviously,
Exactly.
it's never on your terms because your body starts as you get older or whatever. But in terms of like financially, it's on your terms. You have to keep playing just for the sake of it. I get that totally. What was behind the decision then? Obviously, you said you didn't quite know what you were going to do at the time, but moving into wealth management, what was the kind of catalyst for that, or did someone guide you along that path or advise you?
So I'd actually, I'd always quite liked kind of looking after money and doing investments and stuff like that. I just never knew kind of what you had to do to become a financial advisor. So I was always like to my mum, who worked in kind of the mortgage sector, quite fancy being a financial advisor. She was like, oh, it's quite tough, a lot of crossing the T's and dotting the I's and, very regulated and stuff like that. I was like, oh, right, okay. And I was like 21, 22 at the time. So obviously I was in my career. So I was like, oh, I don't really need to think about it just now. So kind of put it to the back burner. And then as time went on, and obviously when I made the decision, I was like, right, what do I want to do? I thought, well, I've not really got any of my English hires or my maths hire or anything like that. So I can't really go and get a job or learn something. I was like, I might need to go back to university and do that. I was thinking to myself, I don't want to go back to university because it's just 2 or 3 years of learning something that you might not even want to do at the end of that. So I thought, nah, I don't want to do that. So I put out I did an interview with the paper when I went part-time, and they were saying, oh, what's your thoughts? I basically just said, oh, I'm thinking I'd quite like to become a financial advisor, but I basically don't know where to start. And I don't know, what I need qualifications wise to get up and running and stuff like that. And obviously it was national, so it was in 2 or 3 papers. So it went out the next second day. And I think like by the end of the day, I'd had maybe like 4 or 5 messages from people all kind of messaged me saying, look, speak to a company called St. James's Place. They do an academy and they'll put you through your training, get your qualifications, and then you can go and set up your own business as a financial advisor. So I was like, oh, sounds absolutely perfect,
Nice.
Gave them a wee call or got introduced to them, spoke to them, and the more I spoke to them, it just kind of felt like it was the right thing to do. So I wanted to make sure that the job that I went in, I didn't have to go back to university and waste a couple of years for that. And B, I could learn as I'm doing it and I could still do my football. So it ticked all the boxes for me. So basically, when I spoke to them and I did like 4 or 5 interviews with them to see if I was the right fit for their business and, to make sure it was right for me. That basically at the end of it, they said, look, we'd love you to come on board. This was in August. We'd love you to come on board, but we've not got a new intake until December. So I basically had August to December where I just started firing out all my exams and trying to do my exams by myself. So I was ahead of the game. Got to December, went into the academy, and I was kind of 2 or 3 exams deep already. So I was kind of in front of everyone already. So I was able to kind of go out and meet people that I'd known and build up a network and speak to people about what I'm doing and all that stuff. So it kind of worked out really well for me, and I've never looked back, and it's just went from strength to strength, James, to be honest. So,
and I guess networking football is one thing, right? So I guess, but also outside that, you've got all the fans and you've got a name well known. Does that? I'm sure that makes it easier for you when you're looking for new clients. People, obviously, there's loads of sport fans. What's your sweet spot, Joe, in terms of people you work with to help them? Is it everyone, or is it like a certain level of income? Who do you work with?
It's everyone. A lot of people say to me like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not." I say, "Look, I'm a financial advisor. I can maybe help you doing something." And I always say, oh, "I've not got any money." And to me, it's like people that don't have money should be the first ones that go and speak to a financial advisor to see why they've not got money. Do you know what I mean? So I try and say to them, look, it's not just about people having money; it's about creating money for you and making sure that you've got money in case anything that happens. So I've got clients that are kind of I've got clients that I look after their kids' money. So like, they're like 3, 4 years old and they've got investments for them for when they get older.
So what's that like? They've got clients that are like a junior, was it? Junior ISA and all that stuff. Yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, so for the kind of the next generation, I've got people that are kind of in the late 80s, early 90s that I look after that are kind of about, wanting to make sure that they pass the money down to the kids effectively, tax efficiently and all that stuff. So do a bit of inheritance planning. I do a lot of kind of life and critical illness policies, family income benefits to make sure that if people that have got, debt and loved ones, that if anything was to happen to them, that their family's taken care of. Because obviously now I think a lot of people realise that if one of the partners passes away, the other one could really struggle with kind of the financial side of things. We've got kind of a mortgage and kids and all that stuff. So I help a lot of people with that. And then obviously I do a lot of kind of retirement planning and kind of just general investment planning, just, a lot of ISAs, unit trusts, pensions and stuff, like consolidation of pensions and stuff like that. So there's a wide variety of clients that I've got, and it's not I'm not in a niche of one area. It's literally everyone, and it's basically anyone that I think, or people that come to me and say, I've got this, can you maybe help me with this? And it's like, you maybe kind of use a car as an analogy. You meet them, you lift the bonnet up and you see what's underneath it, and you actually realize there's 2 or 3 things that you can help them with, and it's just giving them little bits of advice here and there on what could make their lifestyle, or what could make their life much better than what it currently is, or make sure it's protected in case anything was to happen and stuff like that. So yeah, I look after footballers, and I look after what footballers call average or normal working people. Yeah. So there's a mix of everyone that I look after.
I guess, do you ever find it difficult to explain, I guess the branding, which is St. James's Wealth Management, sometimes might be hard to, like, you've explained all the things you help with. Is that a challenge, explaining that this is what I do, or this is, to get through, like you said, people might say, I haven't got any money, I don't want to speak to you, but getting that across, like, is that always that difficult?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll use kind of the football guys as an example. I look after quite a few footballers from Scotland, because I want to make sure that they aren't going to fall into that trap of finishing football and not having anything behind them from their career and stuff like that. So I try and get them to put their money away. And a lot of these guys have, earned good money down, and they've played down in England, and they've moved up to Scotland, just because they want to play in the Premier League and stuff like that and do well. But like, I'll speak to them and I'll say to them, you're 26, 27, you've never had anyone chat to you, not had anyone come and speak to me about investments, pensions, or anything like that. Really? So there's a lot of players that actually have earned good money, but have never had good advice given to them about what they should be doing with that money. So I'm basically trying to educate them on what areas it is that they should be looking at, or what areas it is I can help them with, and explain to them how investments work, how the taxation of investments work, how pensions can't be accessed until certain ages, how you get tax relief on the contributions, how it can save you paying tax over, the tax year and stuff like that, because of certain tax thresholds that you could hit. So it can be quite challenging, but because I've been in that industry, I make sure that I just sit them down and just speak to them as a normal person and say, look, this is, try and keep it in football lingo, and try and just say, look, I'm not going to use, jargon. I'm just going to use normal words. I'll swear if I have to. I'll be myself. And they appreciate it and they understand it at the end of it. And they always kind of say to me, I wish I had someone like you, 3 or 4 years ago, that I could have started back then. And the amount of players that have said that to me is ridiculous.
So what's next with that then? Because it feels like, when you explain it, it feels like a real big opportunity there. Just in football, if that's the case, people earning, or it might be in all walks of life, people earning good money but not really understanding that. And I suppose there's another podcast to talk about education, whether it should be in schools and stuff, like financial education and all that. But what's next for your business? Are you looking at, I guess, next 3 years or so, 3, 4, 5 years? Are you looking at expanding that? You're going to come to the end of your playing days and stuff. But what's your focus for the future?
Yeah, so the business side of things, I've just under 4 years. I look after about 10 million under management. So I've done pretty well in the first kind of 3.5 years. I've just brought on my mum as my kind of practice manager, so keeping it in the family. So she's going to help me with admin and all that stuff. Hopefully next year I will increase the funds under management, increase the client bank, gain more referrals from clients that I've got and stuff like that. And then what I'd like to do is, once I get to a position in the next 5 years that maybe I've got too many clients that I can't personally look after myself, maybe look to bring on an ex-footballer as an up-and-coming advisor, put them through the academy, take them under my wing as in my business, give them some clients to look after, build up their kind of experience and build up their know-how of the job, and then kind of, once they're ready, send them on the way and let them build up their own business themselves. And then just kind of keep that ticking over and kind of bringing on staff members and, obviously getting premises and stuff like that, because I want to make sure I've got a base for everyone to be at. So quite big plans, but plans that I probably see myself being able to accomplish, just as long as I keep doing the things that I'm doing.
Yeah, and it feels like that synergy, like you're bringing on the football, it's almost like giving back a little bit as well for keeping your brand, obviously, is well-known football. If you're bringing them through, that sounds awesome. Just one more question for me. You've, talking to you, feel you come across really calm and collected and everything under control. Is there anything we always ask about how you stay kind of centered or at performing at a high level, and do you have any habits and stuff like that? But I'm just wondering, if, stress or anything, does that play a part in in your life? And have you got anything that you put in place? Or is it that you have the outlet of football and that kind of covers it off for you?
Do you know what? I don't know. I'm not a very stressful guy. That's not to say that I don't get annoyed at things, as I'm sure probably everyone that listens to your podcast will get annoyed at one thing or another. But I try and keep that in house, and I try and keep that away from my work and stuff like that. With football is a release, if you're playing bad, you can go off your rocket in the changing room and swear and shout and point at people and all that stuff. That's just the way football is. And if people haven't been in professional football or been in football as a team, that's just the way it is. You get people that I'm quite a moaner in football, and a lot of my teammates probably don't like it, but it's because I expect the best. I'm quite a professional guy, so so I don't really get stressed in kind of this job. Like I get a wee bit like annoyed at things if things haven't maybe worked the way it is, or someone's maybe messed you around for one reason or another. But at the end of the day, there's nothing you can change. So what's the point? You can only learn from it and move on. And that's kind of what I've been trying to do for my whole football career, and kind of this job is, you make a mistake on a Saturday, you can't turn back the clock. So what's the problem? And yes, you can be annoyed and disappointed, but why get upset about it? Why cry into your pillow? Why think, oh, I'm the worst footballer in the world? Just move on and just say, do you know what? These guys that are in the stand, or these guys that are watching at home, probably would give their right arm or right leg to be where I am. So they're not good enough. I was good enough to make it as a footballer. So I'm just like, well, yeah, we all make mistakes, and that's just the way it is. And then in the work side of things, it's just, I've just got to keep calm and collected, because you never know the type of person you're going to meet and stuff like that. So you've got to make sure that you're presentable, and you can answer any questions, even if you might think it's the easiest question to answer. People don't understand finances sometimes, and it's just making sure that they understand everything that's you're telling them and that they're asking you and stuff like that. So yeah, no stress balls or anything like that on my end.
Yeah, no. Just the last one. We normally ask for you to kind of go back. What would the one question we ask is, like, if you went back and give yourself a piece of advice, and it might be that you do this already, but if you were going to go back and maybe speak to yourself when you're in your playing days, early playing days, is there a piece of advice you'd give yourself then, or would it be start the business then, or is there something else you'd go back and say?
There'd probably be two bits of advice: one to help me in football, and one to help me off the field. So if I was to go back and kind of like be 16 again, I'd probably go back and say, right, start putting money into an investment from 16, into a pension from 16 until you're 50 or something like that, and you'd be a millionaire. It's just there's no question about it. So I would do that, and then kind of to help me on the field, I'd go back and say, I was never the quickest player, so I was always, I wasn't really, really slow, but I wasn't really, really fast. I was kind of mediocre, like average, probably below average. But I would say go do some speed drills and get your speed up, because I think if I was quick, I'd probably be playing at a better level than I would have played at a higher level longer than what I did, put it that way.
No, good advice, man. I appreciate it. Conrad, thanks for coming on today and being so transparent. We really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. You can subscribe anywhere you get your podcasts. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can write to us at dryphase.podcast@coordinate.cloud, tweet us at coordinatesport, or follow us on Instagram at coordinate_sports, or on my account at James_ventures. This episode was produced by Nancy Kwamboka, with support from Claire Goodchild and Lola Small, with special thanks to Rochelle. I'm James Moore, and you've been listening to The Drive Phase from Coordinate Sport.